Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimists, where we talk about all things film with a healthy dose of optimism. And today we have a guest on the podcast. She is a great podcaster herself with her program, The Morning Dove. She is an activist, an influencer, and you should definitely follow all her works we'll be getting to later in the podcast. She is Allie Felker. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. I love it when people call me an influencer because I feel very much that I'm not an influencer, but I love it.
Words.
You were an activist first.
Yeah.
But
I'm like, me and my couple hundred followers, yeah. I'm trying to influence them as much as I can.
Well, we're so excited to talk more with you, Allie, about what you do, but then also you've brought a fantastic film to the table for us to all watch. And Seth, do you want to introduce what that is for us today?
yes, Allie is having us watch another Nicolas Cage film, which I shouldn't say having as if it's a chore by any means. We're always happy to go back in the cage. We're watching Moonstruck, which was fantastic. And Meg, I think you were completely new to this film.
Completely
right?
new, yes.
I watched the first time recently.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead, Megan.
Well, I was going to say, embarrassingly thought that it was a Woody Allen film. Glad to say that that's not what it is. And
Yes,
yeah,
you had some hesitation. I think you were thinking of Stardust Memories. I think that's a movie he has, but yeah, we're gonna take a pretty hard no Woody Allen movie stance. I think this day, year of our Lord 2022, we don't need to dip into that pedophilic well. So yes, this is instead a much better movie, a more fun movie. But Allie, why don't you tell us about why you chose this?
Yeah, absolutely. Moonstruck is like one of my go-to movies when I'm feeling down. It does kind of give me a sense of home. I know we're going to talk about like Italian Americanism. I am not actually that Italian, but I grew up in a very Italian-centered home. So even though like blood-wise I'm not super Italian, there's certain aspects of the film that do make me feel like home. So this is like my go-to sick movie, my go-to movie when I'm just like feeling down. I think the first time I saw this movie was when I was in my early teens, and it was the first time I've ever seen a man throw a table and then kiss a woman, and I was like, oh, wow. And growing up very conservatively, that was something that I think I was like, oh, interesting.
It's formative, yeah. That scene holds up very well, I'd say.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. You know, you hit on something right away that I think we should all discuss. Folks know this. I am not straight. All of three of us here are attracted to men. What is our thought on Nicolas Cage as an attractive leading man in general, and is it any way different in this movie? Because I think I'm more used to his more recent movies. That I love him as a romantic leading man in this movie, but I don't really know where the cutoff is. You know, we talked about Pig last time, which is not exactly a romantic leading man movie, but how does he work for you, Allie? Is he in general handsome? Does he just have a passion that works really well in this movie?
I think it's definitely the passion.
He's missing two teeth in this movie.
Yeah.
Too, which I thought, is that like a weird tape thing that he had two teeth taken out for a previous movie he did? He was already that hardcore, like 1984, and I think he has since had the work done. I'm pretty sure he has a full set now, but I did not notice that until my rewatch. He's missing two teeth. So he's particularly sexy with that, to overcome that, I think.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that he's like a conventionally handsome person. However, yeah, the passion, and I think just the way he carries Cher in that scene, and then also you know, his passion for the opera, and he's like, I just want to take a woman to the opera. You know, I think like it does play into a sort of fantasy, even though he doesn't look the part of like a leading handsome romantic man.
Sure. Where's he land for you, Megan?
I love that take, Allie. Nick Cage just personally doesn't really do it for me ever, including my National Treasure phase, like as a kid and stuff. So, but I totally agree with you. So like, I liked this watching of the movie because it was, Seth and I kind of like have dogged on rom-coms a little bit, especially like modern rom-coms, because they're just so a little bit like, okay. But this one is really nice and like gritty, I feel like. And it had a little, and it was pretty, I really liked like the dry humor in it, and it was just very, it had like a darker undertone, which I think a lot of like 90s movies at the times kind of did.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of what I liked about it. And then Nick Cage's character in it really kind of like set that in stone and was a catalyst for that kind of like energy. So I thought that was really unique for me coming into rom-coms. So that's where he like shined in it for me.
Yeah,
I
National
think that,
Treasure. I was way more attracted to the his like little nerdy buddy.
Yes.
oh yeah,
Me and my sister too. We would swoon over him.
Oh
he
yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I don't know if that guy's been
teen
anything for a while,
dream.
but he was like the sidekick who was always hotter than the lead in like
Yes.
several movies like that for like 10 years or something. He was
He
like
was in The
failure
Hangover.
launch and a weird.
I forgot.
That's right, he was in The Hangover.
Oh,
Yeah,
He was like
he was
that
always
side
like the
character.
handsome one who for some reason we're acting like isn't, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will have to look up his name at some point for
I know.
reference or whatever, but
For reference,
yeah. hope he's okay. You know?
Wherever he is.
Okay, you've already mentioned, Italian centric upbringing. Folks, I think people are pretty familiar with Moonstruck. We're going to do a kind of synopsis as we get into it, where we might be talking about themes in general. But Allie, you did the pick. Do you want to do a brief synopsis that we can like as concise one?
Yeah, I'll try. So so basically the movie is about a woman named Loretta, who's played by Cher. She is 37 years old. She's a bookkeeper. She lives with her parents in a multi-generational Italian American home. And she gets engaged to this man who we assume she's been dating for probably a short period of time. And we also find out that her previous husband died by getting hit by a bus, and they live in New York City. So she gets engaged to this man. He has to go home because his mother is dying, so he flies home to Italy. She tells her parents that she's engaged, and his only request is that she tries to make things right with his brother, with whom he has this bad blood. And we find out that this brother's bad blood is a very dark humored, kind of funny reason. And then what ends up happening is she has sex with the brother, goes to confession, decides she's going to go back to her fiance. Eventually she falls in love, and there's all these different like intertwined themes of like family and culture. I love the theme of like superstition that kind of flows throughout the film with like curses and it's just great.
The superstitions are an interesting one because it seems to be grounded in good Christian practices, more specifically Catholic. It's like, well, we didn't get married in a church the first time, right? That's part of that's the bad luck that resulted in husband one being hit by a bus. That is at least the logic. And he didn't get down on one knee to propose, if I'm remembering right, because she makes sure that the new guy does this correctly, which he's hesitant to. It's a great scene of the whole restaurant stopping to make sure this goes correctly. Love that. That
and
happens
the whole lore, I didn't even realize it's a bit of a love letter to like the moon. Hello, Moonstruck. But they do this whole scene of this like brilliant blue moon or full moon.
Right.
And it's just has, the way you said it, Allie, it has like supernatural powers over everybody basically. They do all these crazy things, and I think that that's a big like, certainly supernaturalism is a big thing, whether people think it or not, in Catholicism, and about curses and just like outside influence and worldly influences. So that was a fun little like layer on top of it, I feel like.
Yeah.
And the moon coming back to deeply inspire a man or deeply inspire love is such a great moment of that happening, like it's been summoned.
I was laughing though, because rewatching the film, I was like, it's almost as if they're saying there was a full moon every night for like 5 nights in a row. Like, we'll let it slide.
I don't fully know the meteorology implications of that for our weather, but that probably isn't good. I don't know. The earth isn't rotating anymore or something.
I'd stop.
So I think that summarizes it very well. And so the younger brother is, of course, in case I wasn't clear, Nicolas Cage, who's a lot younger than Donnie Alejo. I don't think they actually look wildly different age-wise, but Danny Trejo's 37 years older than
Oh,
Nicolas
really?
Cage.
Wow.
Honestly, I didn't really question watching the movie. It's like, yeah, he's the younger brother, and I think Nicolas Cage must have been early 20s or something. And Danny Trejo's not what you'd call a handsome man, but was looking great for his age, apparently. To be 37 years older, I'm not sure how exactly old he was at the time, but one thing I was doing a little bit of research for this. Actually, it's the movie's on HBO Max, and the making of the movie, like I imagine, like the DVD special is on there as well. And Cher, who's Armenian, Native American, and Olivia Dukakis, who plays her mother, is Greek. They were both a little insecure about being able to pull off a Italian American accent, and the actress who played Rita, Julie Bavoso, who's mostly a theater actress, like, no problem, I could teach you this really fast, and did. And so she was kind of the model for it, and kind of encouraged them to take the role and to nail that. And I already noted, Allie, you were the most Italian American here between the three of us. So I don't exactly have the best ear for it. I'm not on the East Coast, but it certainly works for me. And I don't really know of any hard takes about Cher fucked up her accent for this movie. She won an Oscar for the movie.
Yeah.
So, and she's great in it. Megan, did you, beside thinking this was a Woody Allen movie, did you have any other preconceived notions that were surprising to you in watching this for the first time?
I mean, I came into it very blindly, I'll say, but I agree with you, Seth. Like, I thought Cher did fantastic. I would have believed fully that she's Italian American. I kind of forget that she has that like Armenian heritage. That's really interesting. She really carries it a lot, I feel like, and it's not surprising to me that it's an Oscar-winning movie. But I think more so for me, I came into it with the idea that it's so stylized to a specific like time period to me of and a setting as well, like New York nighttime setting movie. And I from the poster you kind of get that, and that's kind of like what I got from it as well, is just a lot of, also I think there's a romanticism of that time period, and like Cher brings a lot of some kind of like regalness, I guess, to it, or just sort of like fanciness that's really telling of like is it early 90s that it was
made? It's
87, yeah, like it's very like indicative, I feel like, of its time period. So it just really feels like a slice of life, and very picturesque in that sense. But topic wise, I do feel like it was grittier than, like I said, like what previous rom-coms were kind of about, especially in like when we moved to 2000s. That for me, that's the turn of like rom-coms becoming a little more like cheesy or or just like unbelievable in a sense. And this one is more a love letter also to New York toughness, I guess, which is what I got from it too. And I love that Italian Americanness aspect of it. I think that it was done well and not overdone, which I liked a lot lot it.
Yeah, I loved that. I love that aspect of it too.
But a lot of great food scenes in this movie, as I think are requirement for an Italian American or Italian movie. The breakfast that looked fantastic, and all of that.
Oh, and when Cher tells him, you'll have it bloody to feed your blood.
Yes.
Like, makes him the steak.
I know, I love that. So on the note of the grittier elements, we should get into the very strange falling out Nicolas Cage has with his brother. I think it's kind of debatable about whether or not it's the brother's fault. Allie, you've seen this movie probably the most. Do you think there's any justice in Nicolas Cage's claims? And would you mind explaining the issue for the listeners?
Yeah. So Cher finds out that there's this, bad blood. And so she goes, Loretta, I should say, goes and finds out that the bad blood is actually because the older brother had asked Nick Cage's character for some bread. And he said, okay. And he turned and he got his hand caught in some type of a grinder. And he lost his hand. And so he then says, because I lost my hand, the woman I was going to marry decided that she didn't want to marry me anymore. And there's this great line where he's like, so, and Cher's reaction is just like, what are you talking about? That's not his fault. Like you were clumsy. Like you were distracted. That's not like he distracted you. All he did was ask you for some bread, And it's so great. And then Nick Cage just like knocks over a bunch of stuff and he screams, "I ain't no freaking monument to justice." It's so over dramatic and like over the top. And I love that like both of the brothers are just these very dramatic people. The older brother is like such a mama's boy and just like so needy. And the younger brother, Ronnie and Johnny. and Ronnie is just like so dramatic, but just so victimized by everything. And it's great.
Well, I love the detail that the two women who work like front of house in Ronnie's bakery are clearly madly in love with him. And he does not give a shit, is just baking bread all day, being like, woe is me, no woman could ever look at me. And they were just like crying, clutching their pearls while he tells this story about this tortured man. If only I could fix him. And here walks in Cher to sweep him away. I feel kind of bad for those women, to be honest. I miss the one who's crying. Got to shoot your shot, folks, I guess.
Yeah, that scene was crazy. I mean, what a like precursor to what Nick Cage can do, I guess. In terms of acting. But I was watching that and I was just like, is this like really happening? Or I didn't know like how self-serious the movie was up until that point, because it happens also very early on. So things like happen really quickly and you're just like, whoa, like, oh my God. I think the dramaticness really like sets the mood, I feel like, for the whole thing. You're like, okay, like this is what we're in for, I guess. And it is kind of self-serious.
It is in a way that it works. I mean, you have a lot of you do have the opera as an element here. You do have a dying mother. Like there is literal life and death stakes happening here, but it is a lot greater than I expected. I'll admit I avoided watching this movie for a long time because I just thought this was diva pop star being beautiful in a movie. Because to be honest, most of the only images I had seen are her post makeover. She just had the fantastic hair. I was not expecting at the start of this movie she'd have gray hair and be a widower. It's like, oh wow, this is not what, and really is doing this great role and doing her best, accepting a marriage proposal that isn't great, but she's making the best of things with. I think we're supposed to assume she's in her 40s, right, and is living at home, which is the norm, but it's like life didn't go the way it was supposed to for her. So that was just a level of realism I didn't expect was in the movie, but also didn't think Cher could pull off, and she's fantastic in it.
Yeah,
there's a very interesting layer of like that's peppered into it kind of sparingly, but it helps to push the storyline along of generational beauty issues and like and women's issues as they age, and the women that are in this family, they experience different infidelity issues and issues of their own, coming to terms with like aging beauty, I guess, which I thought was really nice. And it's clumsy, it's not like perfect, but they're kind of talking about it, and they're talking about it sort of as a family because it's like they have to. And I just thought it was a nice little touch to like bring generational familial like beauty notions and aspects into it. It was just something that I didn't expect, and I was like, oh, like, wow.
Olivia Dukakis's character, the mother who I'm blanking, is one of the most interesting parts of the movie for me. Rose.
She's my favorite. Yeah, Rose is my favorite character.
Please expand.
Okay, yeah. Because she really kind of stands like, while everyone else sort of has like these grand notions and they're very dramatic, or they have like these ideas of, oh, it was because I was cursed or because of this, bad luck. At the end of the movie, when she really just wants to know why her husband isn't pursuing her anymore and why he's pursuing other women, she says, why do men chase women? And she asks two different men this. And, one of them says, oh, well, when God took the rib out of Adam,
yes,
dramatic. And then she's like, no. And he says, well, maybe it's because they fear death. And she's like, no, that's it. It's because they fear. And it's like a very logical, like, there's no bullshit with Rose. Like, Rose is just a very like cut and dry person. I love her.
No, I love that sequence because Rose, we should, for plot for folks who haven't seen it, at the same time when Loretta is being proposed to by Johnny, there is a familiar face to TV fans, John Mahoney, who was the dad on Frasier, is having a date with a much younger woman. I think it comes out it's his student, and is having his drink splashed in his face by her as she abruptly leaves. And this is the thing that keeps happening. We keep going back to this restaurant and this keeps happening. And at one point, Rose is already aware in the movie that her husband, who's Cher's father, is cheating on her. So she goes to this restaurant by herself and sees this man have the exact same experience and has this really fun moment of, kind of having this slight flirtation and invite him to the table, fully not intending to cheat on her husband, I think, but also wants company. And the guy cannot really get past the fact that this isn't going to lead back to her bedroom, but she just enjoys this male attention from a peer, and is also, I think, appropriately smug about, like, you're really dating your students,
Yeah.
And I think he's the one who says, like, oh, well, men are chasing the rib because women have it, and does not give the initial satisfying answer.
Yeah.
I enjoy her having that kind of contemplation of trying to figure out her place in life, of what she's comfortable with, knowing she's been, experiencing infidelity and not really. She does finally confront him at the end of the movie. And I wasn't expecting that. I was really sure what was going to happen with that, but she confronts him is it at the breakfast table or at the dinner table? She confronts him in front of other family members, right?
Yeah, everyone's at breakfast and
right.
She confronts him, and then I think then Johnny comes home after that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a big confrontation scene. It's like everybody's confronting everybody about
what confrontations left on. And right.
Yeah. And then Cosmo's dad, so Cher's paternal grandfather, his character name is just Old Man, which I love. And he's just like, I'm so confused. He doesn't understand. Like, there's just all these family dynamics unfolding in front of him. He's like
crying.
Yeah.
He's enjoying his dogs, which is great. Yeah. I love watching him walk the dogs. On the note of the making of, that actor is a Russian actor, apparently. And was very hard of hearing at this time. So if you see these breakfast scenes, he's leaning forward and he's paying attention to when someone else stops talking, so he knows to do his lines. And that's just how he did the whole movie. He couldn't actually hear. He did his parts great. He knew his lines, but he had to just watch because he couldn't hear anything. So
that's insane. Yeah, you
very
would never know.
Great level of professionalism, These are why we need to have making of documentaries on more DVDs, folks, or put them on HBO Max. That works for me too.
Yeah,
but enjoy the behind the scenes stuff.
Could I ask you, Allie, like, about the Italian American aspects of it? I grew up like Catholic in a Catholic, like Spanish Catholic family, so I should say Mexican Catholic family. So the idea of like superstition really rings home to me, and it was really cool and just like familiar, I guess, to see these big life changes. Just Catholicism is like very funny to drip it over on top of like these egregious things that people do, because it was so funny to me that she like went to confession after her night of sin to confess it. So how did you feel about all these little like isms in there? Did it work for you? And could you talk more about like your experience with its cultural aspect, I guess?
Yeah. So so I grew up with my mom and my grandparents until I was 6 years old. My grandpa is half Italian. So though there's not like a lot of lineage there, he's very Italian when it comes to like his traditions and sort of expectations. So there was like little things in the movie where, like I said earlier, like they do make me feel like home. Like some of even just the hand gestures, like when Johnny's mom back in Italy is dying, she just like sort of swats her hand forward and like that's a very Italian thing that I have seen in my extended family. We would always say like capiche, like do you understand? Like capiche was just like a word that I thought was an English word growing up. But like one of the main things is like the single mom or a single woman living with her parents. That was always sort of an expectation. So when my mom had me, she was not married, and we lived with my grandparents, and it wasn't even like so much of a money thing as it was just that's just what you do. Like if you're a single woman, you don't live alone, like you live with your parents. And so when Cher's like, oh yeah, like she's obviously living with her parents in this multi-generational household, like that just seemed like a very normal expectation, and sort of the like conservatism that goes along with that, I think was really normal. but yeah, whenever Cosmo would like put his hands on the table and, you know, smack the table or something, like those were things that I would see in my house growing up. And it was just very like funny to me to see those things. Like I remember as a kid, I like slammed the door on accident and my grandpa was like, don't slam any doors, because it's like, that's when you're angry. Like you're angry, you slam the door. Like, I don't know. It's funny little things like that.
Was it that's his power move? He wants to reserve the right
Yeah.
For the slamming.
Yeah. Well, it's like, if you're not angry, you're not going to be slamming doors. Like you only
Fair
do
enough.
that when like you're angry and you smack tables and slam doors and stuff. And, you know, it's very expressive.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I love seeing instances too in film where it's like subtle, but it's a connection piece to your life, and like that's always really like special. And especially like these time past pieces, because we're kind of seeing like our families or like our generational experiences, I guess, which I related to that too, and it was fun. It's always just fun to like see and kind of travel back, I guess.
Also, my next door neighbors growing up were Jordanian, and I think there's a lot of similarities there between like those warmer cultured places, you know. So I grew up like going to their house often, and so like even some of those traditions, so they're not Italian, there's like just a difference in like sort of that cultural aspect too, which I think would be really similar in like a Hispanic culture or even just Catholic culture. Like I think there's a lot that you can find familiarity with in this film.
Oh yes. I agree.
And this is hardly a new thing to say, but to my knowledge, it's one of the few Italian American films and mainstream consciousness that is not about organized crime, you know. And which, you know, I think we all have varying degrees of love for, you know, the best of those movies, but like this is not The Godfather or Goodfellas, and there's no criminal activity happening in it. And I imagine that might be somewhat deeply refreshing for an Italian American to have something that doesn't end in murder, you know, as representation.
My mom, my grandma, and I would have Godfather days where we would just like binge The Godfather, and my grandpa would come in and he'd be like, you know, not all Italians are like this.
Representation matters.
Yeah, it's true.
Does, absolutely.
Absolutely true.
In The Sopranos, there's an episode where all the mob wives are upset with representation in media, even though they're all mob wives. They're talking about how they're, which, you know, it's a TV show, so there's a lot of levels of meta happening there. But very cool. Thank you for diving into that. Allie, I wanted to go a little bit into the craft of this movie. This was surprising to me. So the writer of this is John Patrick Shanley, who is not a name we know hugely for film adaptations, although he was nominated for an Oscar for this, but he's a playwright who was a playwright well before this, a successful one, has continued to be a playwright, and more, I think his biggest thing he's famous for is Doubt. So we're talking a very high caliber of author here who is a Pulitzer Prize winner, you know, who wrote this screenplay. And I think that speaks largely to the levels of grittiness and realism that has happened in this, but also supernatural. Like, it's not accurate to say this is a realist film entirely, but it does have some very practical conversations and it's some very more nuanced looks at things. And also, you know, the moon is, like you said, a full moon for 5 days, and it's Cosmo's moon, as his brother is declaring, and everyone's falling in love. Well, not everyone, certain people are, you know. How do you feel, Allie, at the end of the movie about Johnny's character?
Johnny's character, I think
that's the brother, right?
Yeah, I feel, you know, a certain level of pity for Johnny's character, because, you know, here he was, you know, he was engaged, but then at the end of the movie we find out that he was going to be breaking off the engagement anyway,
right?
And he kind of does come off as like the fool throughout the whole film, but I do love like his flair for the dramatic, and I think you know, at the end we can kind of see him playing the victim a little bit, and I think that might just be a family trait, because, you know, Ronnie was so much the victim with his hand getting chopped off. So
right.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, there's a new reign for victimhood
Yeah.
temporarily. But yeah, I'm with you. I feel was entertained by him, and I felt, I think, an appropriate amount of bad for me. I didn't really feel like, oh, that's what you deserve to not get the girl,
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, he almost immediately abandons the I mean, immediately bans the plans to marry her. So
Mhm.
not going to work out for her. So
Yeah. And based on superstition, he was like, I can't marry you
right,
because
that's
if I
true. It's
marry
always
you, my mom's gonna die, which is like a
yeah.
completely like ridiculous thing.
That's right. We keep getting that's a good point too. It's like we have some superstitions that are reoccurring, like the why the first marriage didn't go right. Another one is Ronnie is convinced that Johnny is bad luck, and this is among his attempts to seduce Loretta, is to tell him he's bad luck. If you're married to him, it's gonna be more bad luck. But he might not be entirely wrong about him being bad luck, or at least he certainly is focused on enough to draw it, I think, to be accidentally looking for it. But you do have new superstitions added throughout it, and that's the latest one is, if I marry you, my mom will die.
Yeah.
Just
And then Ronnie's response is, you're still letting that woman run your life. So you know
Mhm.
that like there's been some history.
Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, mom is in Sicily, right? Like mom is,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we can assume, has not been an active part of their lives, directly in a while. So I don't know. As an estranged one myself, I'm in Team Ronnie in that one.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed the ending. It ends to me pretty ridiculously,
Yeah.
but that is like the perfect like bow to this kind of crazy movie. To me, is that all these pieces align. You know, the poor brother, he doesn't even want to marry her in the first place, and so it's just I kind of like the fantastical element that the ending brings to me. Almost that almost feels like a fairy tale in of itself, and
Right.
it's like done in a different way, and I always am a fan of that. I think that the movie does it well, and it's not because it was so dramatic throughout the whole thing. It's kind of fun to see like just it get tied up in a nice little bow at the end.
I mean, that's a very strange form of Deus ex machina. The brother doesn't want to marry her anyway. So,
Yeah.
but I agree with you, Megan. Like, I mean, especially like at heart, this is a rom com, and I think you want a pretty bow on a rom com, even if it is. There does have to be a certain amount of cheesy, warm feeling to it, and I think that's a necessity.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty abrupt too. It all just
Yeah.
kind of like do done.
Yeah,
Like
this is a pretty tightly paced movie too. This is
Mhm.
what, like an hour and a half.
Hour 30 or 40.
Yeah, I think it moves by really fast,
Mhm.
and also like plot wise, it all happens really quickly. This does only take place over a few days. So
Things get going really fast too, like the in the beginning. So
right.
we're kind of dumped right in.
So Allie, how did you feel about Loretta's character arc?
I loved it. And in a way, it almost reminded me of the Grease character arc, even though
Mm,
like not in quite such an extreme, because she doesn't go full bad girl, but she gets her hair done, she gets herself all glammed up. As a hairstylist, I can only love that for someone.
we should note real quick. How do you feel about the hair? Is this
Oh,
Oh,
I
yes.
am so jealous.
okay?
Like
Yes.
I have the
Same.
straightest hair, and all I want is a
Allie.
perm.
Oh, they had a scene. Sorry, this is a side note, and I'm geeking out
Sure.
over here too. But like, I thought they were gonna straighten it, and I was like, if they straighten this woman's hair, I may have had to quit the movie or the podcast. Sorry, but like, it would have been too much of an issue for me. But they made it bigger, and I loved her curly hair. I love it.
Love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so she like gets herself glammed up, she spends some money, and I think like her arc is that she comes from being this sort of like frumpy widow to someone who has a lot of self-confidence. I think she does get more confidence, but then with that there's like an edge of irresponsibility. I mean, not only is she sleeping with her fiance's brother, but then she also like has that scene where she's supposed to have her aunt's deposit and
Right, right.
and she's supposed to
Mhm.
deposit to the bank, and she forgets about it because she gets caught up in this romance. And so I think it's just a really interesting arc where she kind of becomes this person who has to balance this guilt that she's feeling along with this new self-confidence. She is in love with Ronnie, and with that, she has to, you know, tend to herself. She's definitely always been someone who cares for others. You know, in the beginning, she's talking to her fiance on the phone who's in Sicily, and she's like trying to give him advice. And she's like, if you're in the sun, wear a hat. You know, she's just always looking out for everyone else. And then I think this is finally the moment where she is able to kind of take care of herself and put herself first, and struggle with the balance of putting herself first and also continuing to like uphold her responsibilities. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. I think Ronnie's character, Nicolas Cage's character, probably represents someone who initially doesn't need as much hand holding. You know, that's not a pun on his hand, but you know, I don't think he'd be too open for advice like wear a hat, whatever. Initially has a little bit more of a tough, you don't need to tell him that thing. Yeah. That's only gonna last so long though in a marriage, you know, because he does propose. But yeah, I think that's a good point. Of there's also like a lack of, or rather a increased vulnerability to keeping up your responsibilities. You know, you're risking that too. I hadn't thought of that before, but yeah, you certainly are seeing a woman actually embrace what she wants for the first time, and we're assuming quite a while. I don't remember if it makes clear when her first marriage was. I think I kind of got the impression that it happened.
Oh, she said she was 27 when she married.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
I forget how long the marriage lasted. To go back to what you said, Allie, I agree too, because I like that. I think it's actually pretty uncommon to have women of either a divorcee, but then also a woman in her older age, like talk about agency, a lot of agency, and then a lot of you know, just coming into your own, of like getting on the dating scene again. And that's such a trope of like, oh, you got to get back out there, like you got to do this, that, and the other one. And she kind of like turns it on its head. And it's like, I think also my mom's a big Cher fan, and nice. I think that this is kind of a characteristic associated with Cher, and I have to think that it's partly because of this movie, is just like embracing womanhood and like sexuality at any age. Like it doesn't matter. And I think that she kind of like pioneered that in this movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think like I just didn't know enough about Cher to know how old she actually was when she did this movie. When I first saw it, I just assumed, oh, it's an older movie, she's younger. I thought she would. This is really I thought she was in her 20s or something. She actually was like late 30s, 40s. And yeah, her having that gray hair in the first couple scenes and was, I thought, very brave for a pop star. You know, someone who looks a certain way when they're in public, you know. And but yeah, absolutely, it's a great, you know, transformation scene. And there was an article I was reading about this that noted I think that makes this transformation scene in a rom-com unique is it finishes at home. She doesn't put on the dress and everything at the store. She has her great hair, but she actually puts it on at home, and that's just for her enjoying this. You know, this isn't her friends dragging her to the salon or dragging her everywhere. And I thought that was an interesting point, that you don't get a lot of completely self-motivated transformations. I feel like in rom-coms, it's usually, if there's a transformation needed, there's a bitchy gay friend or something. Who's leading it well.
And like, even as cheesy as like her getting dressed at home was, I think that was like the one like little, you know, cheesy part of the movie where you're like, okay. But even in that part, you know, she's like putting on the lipstick and she's like looking at herself like, oh, like, you know, it really is for her.
Yes.
Well, I love the awkwardness. I love when they show up, and Nicolas Cage, who's volunteer, you know, who suggested this, required this rather, is also a little awkward because he hasn't been to the opera in a long time, and it's her first time. And I thought that was a cute of kind of two older, not he's so old, but you know, two people getting back out there, you know, and kind of acknowledging the awkwardness of this date. And it's on one hand a great suggestion of something other than dinner, but you know, it's a great, as terms of switching it up, interesting date. But man, if you don't have an ear for opera, that's a very awkward first date.
It was a good like reminder of just like connection, I guess, which a lot of, I mean, people coming into it now, it's like we don't experience it as much, but it's fun to be reminded of like even like the dinner scene with the professor saying, come to my table. I'm like, I would like never do that. I feel like it's just fun to see it played out, I guess. And to see like what can happen. Like, why is it so scary? Just, talk to people. It's like fine. And that's like a lesson that I took on from it. And it was nice. And I think that's very like just so characteristic of like New York setting as well for me, is just like, yeah, come sit at my table. Like, it's a bit like stylized like that, but I appreciate it. I liked it.
Yeah.
I think New York at a time when people could afford it is also very deeply idolized. I'm not sure exactly the housing rates then, but better than now. So,
and these are like well-off people.
That's true, yeah. Which I like too. I think the professor mentions like, what is it? You live in a mansion when he sees the like 3 or 4 story house, which it is big, and there's three generations there, right?
Yeah.
I like that commented on. That's always a hang up for me, is does this real estate actually make sense for this character? And he's a Cosmo is a successful plumber who's got a bit of a franchise going on. So I think it tracks.
Yeah. And he says like, oh, I don't want to pay for the wedding, and Rose is like, you're richer than Roosevelt, like you have money.
that was part of the superstition too, right? Is he didn't pay for the first wedding, and that's why they didn't have it in a church. So I thought that was interesting too. We get this, how turned around is Cosmo gonna get, like how from this stuffy guy who seems to be spending his extra money on his mistress. Unclear if this is the first or in a string, but like, is this going to completely stop and he's going to stop being so stingy? I kind of think so. That was my takeaway. And I do like, again, I like that it's simple as his wife calling attention to it in front of everybody. I loved everybody's dynamic in this movie.
Yeah, it's super fun.
That is also true, though. This is, despite a movie with strange brother stuff and hands being cut off, it's a very fun movie. I also definitely thought it was a musical before I saw it, just with it being Cher.
Really? Oh yeah, she is kind of like in a very musical like position in the
or in the poster, right? She's, I thought Moonstruck was going to be like the title song she would be singing or something, and so that was very jarring to me that she doesn't sing in this, right?
Except the opera.
Oh my gosh. And then what cracked me up about the opera scene was when they go to the women's restroom and everybody's like getting ready in there. Whenever I watch things in now this like post-COVID world, I'm like,
I know
it's so crowded.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's it took me quite a while to watch certain things that have too big of a crowd on there. All right, folks, I think we did a pretty good summary of this movie. Bottom line is it's quite fun and you should watch it. It's available currently on HBO Max. So we're now going to transition into our recommendations. And I don't think we're going to do a particular theme here, just movies we saw that are kind of adjacent or reminded us by this movie. So Allie, what's your recommendation for the listeners?
Okay, my recommendation is a little bit silly. This is more of a cult classic and not necessarily a good film, but my recommendation is Warm Bodies. It is a zombie movie that is also a rom-com that is also inspired by Romeo and Juliet, and it's just a fun film. It's not a film. It's a fun movie.
we're liberal with the term film.
We're pretty liberal with the word film.
I had no idea it was a Romeo and Juliet adaptation, or like as loosely as it may be. Did you know that, Megan?
I did not know. I didn't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, the two separate worlds being, one of them is a human and the other one is a zombie, and that's sort of their Kessel and Montague.
More extreme than Romeo plus Juliet. I love it, pushing the boundaries.
We love our cult classic movies. So.
We do, absolutely,
No shame there.
We're not only talking about the tried and true classics, so love to get some attention to those. But fantastic, Warm Bodies.
Yes.
Megan, do you have one?
Yes, for sure. Well, speaking of cult classics, so this movie reminded me of a go-to rom-com that I always go to, Allie, too. So it's kind of my same deal, like a sick day movie. And for me, that's My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which it really holds a place in my heart. It deals with culture a lot more like obnoxiously, I would say. I feel like this movie did a really good job of like incorporating it in more organically. But My Big Fat Greek Wedding literally is just like about Greek jokes, so and like how funny their accent is, I guess. And so I don't know how like well that holds up, but I think it's funny. It's kind of like my family's humor also growing up, so it really just felt kind of familial to me as well. So, and it had parallels, you know, it's a woman, she goes through a transformation to be and it is a rom-com, so it's like for a love interest, and it's a little bit more of like a straight shot rom-com in that sense. But for me, what shined in it was the cultural aspects, which I really enjoyed in Moonstruck as well, which I did actually think Moonstruck did a little better and more like a more honorable job, I guess. But I'll always love My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It's so fun to me.
I haven't seen that in a long time. I should watch that again.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Mine is going to be another Cher movie. It's Witches of Eastwick, which is a dark comedy that involved Cher, Susan Sarandon, and Michelle Pfeiffer are three women in a small, I think, Connecticut town who don't realize they're witches and don't realize that they are all summoning the perfect man who may or may not be the devil, but is definitely Jack Nicholson. And it's a great Jack Nicholson being absolutely fantastic, wearing very strange kind of proto jorts, but also being sexy with a martini glass, seducing Michelle Pfeiffer, Susan Sarandon, and Cher. And the weirdest part about it is it's directed by George Miller, who directed Max Road. Max Road? Mad Max. Thank you. So yeah, and also the Babe movies. So very all over the place CV for that guy. So this actually came out the same year as Moonstruck, but I found it very funny and very, very watchable. Everyone in here is great. Both my previously stated fascination with the occult, particularly in New England, it kind of ties into that very loosely. You have some very horrified Protestants about what's happening who were treated as insane. But yeah, this is, if you want to have Cher yell at Jack Nicholson while he's looking like he's loving it with a martini, this is the movie for you. So
I'm in.
Who doesn't want to see that, right?
What a picture set. Is it set in modern times?
It is. It's set in modern times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah, it's great.
That's my mom's favorite.
Oh, really?
Favorite Cher movie, probably.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, folks, as we mentioned earlier, Allie is doing some very important work as an activist and activist for safe pregnancy. And you have a long history of activism, Allie, and we're very glad that you're focusing on this cause. We want to give you some time here to address that, to just address the audience and tell them what they should know.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you so much for like opening the floor to this. This conversation is one that I think is so important to have because it unfortunately is something that is pretty taboo still. So I am an activist with an organization called Push for Empowered Pregnancy. We do stillbirth prevention. So our goal is to end preventable stillbirth. A stillbirth is a fetal death that occurs after 20 weeks spontaneously. And before it happened to me, I thought this was something that was incredibly rare. And I soon found out that it wasn't nearly as rare as I had originally expected. It happens to 23,000 families a year in the US, which is 65 families a day. So it's something that is very close to home, but it's also something that I feel really ties into women's empowerment as well, because our goal is to educate and empower women in the process, help them learn how they can be activists for themselves in their doctor's office and how they can advocate for themselves and for their babies, and also how partners can get involved in the pregnancy as well. So yeah, definitely check out Push for Empowered Pregnancy. We have lots of information. I'm on the legislative team, so I do a lot of legislative advocacy, which becomes more long and drawn out and not nearly as catchy, but I love it. So it's lots of fun.
Very cool. Well, we're very glad, very honored, frankly, to have you on here, Allie, and very glad to give you a platform. We'll definitely encourage our listeners to look at Push for Empowered Pregnancy. Is there any other ongoing matter or any other website that they should be donating to or anything like that?
Definitely check out Push Pregnancy. We always accept donations. All of our volunteers are volunteers, but what was I going to say? Oh, you can also check out Count the Kicks, which is a campaign that is in almost 50 states, but that is basically, if anyone is familiar with like the back to sleep campaigns that had to do with reducing SIDS,
Right.
Count the Kicks is our stillbirth reducing campaign.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll link all of that below, Allie, and just thank you so much for your willingness to share that, and we're so happy to open that up to our audience too. So, and thank you for your work. It's
Thank
amazing.
you.
Absolutely.
I really
Yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. It's very important work, and folks, I think as you start to look more into this, it's going to hit home harder than you expect. Like I was saying, this is something that is taboo, and unfortunately we don't talk about it, but in just doing some brief research into it, a lot more people than I realized experience this. I know my own family members had stillbirths that were just kind of written off as not the plan, and it was just never talked about. It's really tragic, and we don't want to just ignore this.
And there's even superstition that's tied into it. I didn't even put this together until right now, but yeah,
there is, isn't
going
there?
back to our theme.
Oh, I'm for sure. For sure.
Well, yeah, I also want to encourage people to follow your podcast, The Morning Dove. I would describe as it's typically interviews with folks who've experienced loss, usually loss related to the stillbirth community, but not exclusively. Another great resource. Honestly, I will say, folks, I'm enjoying that podcast for just, we're still going through the grief of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's not quite over, and even if you're in a place that is safer, that was very traumatic. If you are, that's why we're out of the woodwork. I think just listening to your podcast, Allie, has been very helpful for me to process grief. So we can always use that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, grief is something that I think it's interesting that it's taboo because we're all going to experience it. We're all mortal. And, there's going to be a time whether we're grieving a job or a person or a pet or even just like this collective grief. I think it's something that I'm very honored to have the opportunity to interview people and to talk about. So
fantastic.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, I think I'll just take a moment here and picture Nicolas Cage with his shirt off so we can kind of increase the mood here.
We didn't ask you, Seth, how do you feel about Nicolas Cage?
Oh, I think, okay, that's a good question.
This is important.
So I do find him hot in this one. I think one of the stranger conversations I've had was somebody told me that their sister really thought he was just smoking and hot in The Weatherman, which
I have to look this up.
Megan, look up a poster for The Weatherman, and like I saw this movie, and he doesn't really seem like a sexual being in this movie. He's a very basic going through divorce dad, and the fact that somebody was so deeply attracted, and this was like his teenage horny sister, was like, that's the Nicolas Cage for me, and that was so baffling to me.
Yeah, that's odd.
And I think when he's being very passionate like this, or like Wild at Heart, which is a crazy movie, him and Laura Dern, like I get it. But if I just am looking at a still photo of Nicolas Cage, not really. You kind of need to see him in action.
Maybe she was into archery? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's also like he has a strange voice. Like even his voice sometimes sounds like it's a parody of his voice in more recent movies, and sometimes that can work in a more grating way, or that can work in a more sexual gravitas. And I know when he has a bit of a southern accent in Wild at Heart, that works for me. What accents do for me says something, I guess. But for me, really is just this and Wild at Heart that I see him as sexy. And even other movies I like him in that are like, I think I've talked about Bad Lieutenant. I don't really think he's hot in that movie, even though he's engaging in sex often as a complete degenerate. But maybe it's also, there's great leading women in this, in Wild at Heart, and this, who's playing off Cher. That's great. It's a very specific thing, but certainly not as a whole.
I was gonna say, I was pretty attracted to Cher.
Cher's great. We can all be open about that. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, have you seen like the TikToks where they're like, do I want to be her or do I want to be with her?
Yeah.
Do you ever follow Reductress?
Yes.
Yeah, they had. Are you familiar with Reductress, Megan?
No,
it's kind of like The Onion, but it's more female centric.
Oh, I got you.
But they had one that's like, why is TikTok sending me recommending lesbian accounts? This woman is about to realize why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. We lighten the mood. Perfect. Well, Allie, great to see you. Great to interact with you. Hope you and Drew and everyone is doing well. How is Chaos handling
Oh my
Tavy, by the way?
gosh.
Megan,
Chaos is
Allie
fine.
has a big husky named Chaos, who's a
Amazing.
wonderful
Perfect
dog.
name.
Chaos is great. He's been good. He has been escaping more.
Oh,
So he has figured out multiple ways to escape our yard. And we'll get calls that are like, "Are you Chaos's parents?" And we're like, "Yep, where is he?" Like we just go around the neighborhood and pick him up. Yeah, he recently racked up $1,000 emergency vet visit.
Oh.
my God.
Everything's fine,
Mhm.
fortunately.
Good.
But
good.
yeah, he peed blood one night,
My
which
God.
I was like, that I don't know a lot, but I know that's not good.
Yeah.
And we took him in, did all this testing and stuff, and then the vet was like, "How's he doing?" And 2 days later, he was, sprinting around the yard, like totally fine. And I was like, "This dog is invincible. He's great." And so she said, "We really just think he bruised himself. He probably ran into something." And
Gosh.
Sure.
yeah, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Cool. Well, glad that we paid for that."
Yeah, true. That's how vet visits go.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
did he grow into the name, or was the name put upon him as a baby?
So we actually got him at 5 years old with the name.
I see. Mhm.
Yeah, so we walked through a pet fair in Alameda, and we had no intention of getting a dog. And we saw this dog, and his piercing blue eyes just like locked with ours, and we're like, "Oh shit, we're gonna get this dog."
Oh yes.
Yeah,
That's how they get you.
Yeah, I
That's
was
how
gonna say that the name seems pretty apropos to his behavior from what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Wow.
we should have known, but
The signs were there.
the signs were
superstition was
all
the
there.
sign.
If anyone's thinking about getting a husky, like, do a lot of research and definitely don't do it for your first dog. This was like our
Oh, yeah.
first. Yeah, we were living in an apartment. Like, we should not have gotten this dog. And we were literally like, we need to buy a house like now.
For the dog.
House this dog.
Wonderful. Well, glad to hear you're all doing well, Allie. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us.
For sure.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Allie, it was so nice to meet you. Thank
It
you.
was so nice to meet you too.
Well, we can do it again. And
Yes, we'd love to have
any
you
movie
back
you
on.
like.
It could be
Thanks,
Warm
yeah.
Bodies. It can be
Yes.
Whatever.
Yeah, I'll try to think of I'll think of another one.
Mhm.
cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great to
Allie.
see
guys
you.
soon.
All
We
right.
appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Folks, we certainly hope you enjoyed our interview with Allie as much as we did. We are going to link all of her resources mentioned in our description below, so be sure to check that out. And in the meantime, send us a line via email. We're on Gmail at filmoptimists@gmail.com. That's plural. And stay optimistic. Thanks, guys.